Hello, fellow Canucks fans. It hasn't been very fun watching these games before the COVID breakout, which has been the most effective breakout on this team the whole season. Cheap joke. The Canucks, I enjoyed watching it, even when they were losing. I'm one of those people that enjoys the process of it. If I see them lose, but I feel like, they were competitive. They were doing some good things. Some players were playing well. The games they played against the Ontario juggernauts, Ottawa and Toronto, they were not fun. I felt bad for the team. They look tired. They look worn out. They've just been hit by this disease we have never seen in our lifetimes or our parents' or even grandparents' lifetimes. And they're just forced to roll out there, missing star players. And it just sucks. It sucks watching Ottawa and Toronto just toy with Vancouver. The Canucks are struggling to be competitive at all. So I just didn't feel like doing a video, and the games were late. But after the game last night, I had some more fun watching the Canucks against Edmonton. So I thought I'd talk about that game and also just kind of like how I'm looking at the team and my feelings. So let's get the negative stuff out of the way. Right now, I know you shouldn't live in the past, but how frustrating is it to think that this team, probably with a competent GM/owner management team, because I'm not going to put all this on Benning. I think Benning is probably definitely not supposed to be the general manager of a team. Definitely on a team that doesn't have a president, and definitely on a team that has a meddling owner. He's really struggling. He was probably a great assistant GM in Boston. That's why he got a good reputation. It's too much for him, and this is probably a no-win situation with Aquilini stepping in. And I think that's why their problems seem to be mostly like problems with timing, like they said, running out of time, and a lack of planning. And I think that's because Aquilini just doesn't know what he's doing in terms of how much money he wants to spend, when he wants to be competitive. And the guy's he's not a hockey man. He owns a team and he owns a bunch of Pizza Huts. And now he's trying to get into the vodka soda market. Very original. But it's very frustrating to think, man, you know what this team needs right now? They need a shutdown defender. A Chris Tanev type would be great. You know that Tanev spent his whole career, gave his teeth. The amount that he signed for in Calgary, he would have signed for that in Vancouver. He might even have signed for less. And you could have had that guy patrolling your blue line, exactly what you need. It would have been great. Now, where do you find the money for that? Well, maybe you don't sign a Holtby. You go for a cheaper backup goaltender. Maybe you don't sign fucking Tyler Myers to $6 million. That is totally handcuffed this team. Myers is fine at like 3 or 4. The guy is a great... I feel like I say the same shit every video, because what else can you say with this team? We know he's a good puck mover at a cheaper amount, but you get rid of him, wouldn't you be happier with Tanev? Maybe you don't trade for Schmidt. I think Schmidt is good. He's having a really tough time with this team. We'll touch on coaching after this as well, because that could be a big issue. Although it's not going to solve everything. But just imagine you have Tanev. Then you got a cheap Stetcher. Now, Tanev and Stetcher combined would probably make about as much as Myers is making. Stetcher you could get for... the guy chose to come to Vancouver as a free agent. He had other teams interested. He probably took less to come here. And they repay his loyalty and his good play. The guy played well by letting him walk and either running out of time to get back to him and just basically treating Tanev, Stetcher, and Toffoli like they are not wanted. And players want to feel wanted. I heard Bieksa come on Halford and Brough, and when he was choosing what team to go to after the Canucks, Anaheim made a big push, flew them down there just for the day, said they really wanted him, it was San Jose. San Jose did all this. Flew him down to San Jose, told him that the players really wanted them, offered them the most money, and when it came time to decide, that was a big factor for him and his wife. His wife told him, these guys actually really want you. You should go there. And then it ended up falling through, and they just kind of, maybe they used that as leverage for something else, and there ended up not being a deal. But players respond to that, and if you're going to treat Tanev, Stetcher, and Toffoli like, oh, well, we'll get to you after we're done dicking around with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Well, fuck you. They left. So you could have had Tanev and Stetcher. Stetcher can move the puck. He's stuck gonna like beat the shit out of people, but he gets in there. He's emotional. He likes the team. He was a part of their core. And anytime he was asked to, he played in the top 4 and did it well. And his underlying numbers showed that he did it well. And he was like a total, exactly who you want in that third pairing. A guy that can step up and play in the top 4 when needed, doesn't look out of place, can move the puck in the current NHL, and is going to be rock solid on your third pairing. I think he can defend a hell of a lot better than Tyler Myers can, because he can fucking move. He can move around in the zone. He can actually get to pucks. Myers is amazing when he has the puck, but defensemen, the whole point about defending is you're not going to have the puck most of the time. You have to go get it, and he cannot go get it. And that's a huge problem. And then out of your 6 defensemen, Tanev and Stetcher would not be your problems. Also, Tanev and Hughes together were a great pair. And then you have Toffoli on a team that desperately needs a shooter that can click in the top 6 for $4 million, for $1 million more than Pearson. And I like Pearson a lot. It's such bullshit. There were a lot of things Benning did over his period that were either bad trades, trading for Goodbranson, great trades, trading Goodbranson away. I think actually it has nothing to do with the GMs in that situation. I think the league just really values Goodbranson because he was a high draft pick and he's a big guy. And now we see that. But Pittsburgh learned their lesson pretty quick with him. Got him the fuck out of town. Then he went to Ottawa, I think, and then he either got injured or benched in Ottawa. I don't care. But, and like I say, you can't live in the past, but thinking that this team could have those pieces, the pieces that were pretty damn important to them in that magical playoff run we saw in the summer. That for me is like, okay, now I'm done. I'm done with Benning / Aquilini. And Aquilini, if you don't want to let a GM run your team, you should just go do something else. Go run a Pizza Hut. Sell the team to somebody who actually gets it. The best damn franchises in sports are ones where the owners give you the money, don't mind a few losses, because you're going to be up and down. Sports are cyclical. It reminds me of this moron that ran a bar in Nanaimo, where I'm from, and he opens up the bar, and it's an Irish pub. And they do really, really well because it's St. Patrick's Day, the first weekend. And every weekend after that, with his like terrible marketing, terrible atmosphere, terrible ambiance. He was a slow-ass bartender, too. He's like, it wasn't very good. And I was brought in. I started putting on music and stuff. And we were doing better than he was doing. But he kept saying, it's not as good as St. Patrick's Day. Dude, that's like saying I don't get as many presents every other day that isn't my fucking birthday or Christmas. That's how it works. And that's the problem with Aquilini is, well, we're not making as much money as when we were a really great team, so let's just keep trying to be competitive. And the hilarious thing is that the more they try to be competitive, the more they sink down in the standings. And this is why it's so frustrating. A couple of years ago, before Hughes showed that he could be a difference maker, although man is he struggling this season, before we had Pettersson impress everyone in the league and show that we may have something special. And now you've got Pettersson, Besser, Demko, Horvat, Miller. And I'll say Miller was a great trade by Benning. I think Benning still can be a decent scout, but he needs all those other ideas to... If you're a fan of wrestling, it's like when Vince Russo was coming up with ideas in the Attitude Era. He'd come up with one really good one and probably 9 others that were total insane dog shit. And I think that's what's happening with Benning. Trading for Miller, it's a good trade. You know, a first-round pick. If you can get a player that's going to be above average for you for a first-round pick, I say you go for it, especially if you can get them cost-controlled for a couple of years, because draft picks are a total crapshoot, even in the first round, even in the top 10. Look at idiot Jake Virtanen. Now, if you're wondering, well, how do you make the money work with Tanev, Stetcher, Toffoli? Okay, so Toffoli, let's say he's about $4 million, Tanev, $5 million, Stetcher, 1.5 or 2. You give Stetcher like 4 years at $2 million or something, that guy's happy. That's his dream. He just made it. And so what's that 549 and say 211 million? Well, you don't sign Myers the year before. So that's most of it. Then you don't have to trade for Schmidt because your defense is locked up on the right side. And I like Schmidt, but you don't need to add his $6 million. And there you go. Or how about this? You still trade for Schmidt. You don't have Myers. And you don't sign Jake Virtanen, who has shown you nothing since he's been on this team. He's shown that he has talent, but he's not an NHL player. He's not an NHL consistent player. You don't give a stupid contract to Jake because you're so cheap. You don't want to pay any money this year, and now every other GM doesn't want to take on his contract. And now he's been given a leave of absence because of some claims of sexual abuse. I won't comment any other on that because I don't know anything about that. But you should always take claims of sexual abuse very seriously. I've heard the other phrase thrown around a lot. We should believe victims of and survivors of sexual abuse. Yes, but I think that also insinuates automatic guilt. I think what you should always do is take it incredibly seriously and then let the justice system figure it out. So now you're stuck with Jake Virtanen, Tyler Myers, and Nate Schmidt instead of Tanev, Stetcher, and Toffoli. And this team would be a fuckload better with those guys. Because, okay, last night and the nights before, when you've got to take on Austin Matthews and Marner, and they're just toying with you. Connor McDavid, who can toy with anybody. You could put out Tanev and Hughes. Tanev is so good. Man, he was so good. I hate that he's not on our team anymore. I fucking hate it. Because when you watched him, not flashy, but he would come up with, I'd say, one or two defenseman highlight reel plays where you go, holy shit, that was really dangerous. He got a good stick on it. He knew where to be. The guy can skate. He can make a first pass. He can hit. He's tough. And you let him walk. So you could fit Tyler Myers and Nate Schmidt, who I like. It's such a piss off. Let's look at the bright side of this, though. There was an interesting story put out where I think it was Aaron Portzline, spoke to former players of Columbus about that team. And one of the things the players said, former players, and I think he said, quote, players that didn't have an axe to grind. He wanted to have a fair analysis. What a lot of the players said were that they were grinded so hard on their restricted free agency contracts by the GM, who tried to get them down to as little as possible. And they were pushed so hard by Tortorella that by the time they became UFAs, they all are like, I cannot wait to get the fuck out of here. Fuck you, Columbus. I'm going anywhere else. I'm going to try to get the most money. So when you got a team that loses Panarin, Bobrovsky, everybody wants to leave. Like, remember when they played with all the rental players to just try to make the playoffs and they couldn't do anything? They're a disaster. You're becoming a place like Buffalo where nobody wants to go and everybody wants to leave. I think that Vancouver, the bright side of this is the players probably like Jim Benning. He gives them a lot of money. He shows a lot of faith in them. And I think they probably like Travis Green too. Although, now we got to talk about Travis Green. The guy doesn't have a contract. What is your plan? They've apparently, Rick Dollywell's reporting, they've reached out to Green. They gave him a contract offer. It's not what Green thinks he's worth. Green has coached for the Canucks for 4 years. He hasn't really had a lot of success other than that run in the playoffs. But as Kevin Woodley says, show me a good coach, I'll show you a great goalie. I'm not so sure about Travis Green. I feel like when I watch their defense play, their systems in the back end seem to be very, very difficult for the players to find people to pass to. And they seem like in a high-stress situation, which is defense on a forecheck. When there's an aggressive forecheck coming, those defensemen need to know before they even get to the puck who's going to be open in this system. And that should be, it's pretty fucking simple. The puck's only going like 3 places. It's going to go to the left corner, it's going to the right corner, or it's going to get dumped in behind the net. So if you're a defenseman, you should already know. It's like baseball. You should know before you get to that puck, right on the dumping, you should know, who am I going to get this to? Who is going to be open? And I think that's the job of the coach. When you're making a guy like Nate Schmidt, who was one of the top defensemen on a very good team in Vegas for years, and you make him look like he's struggling. Although, last night, I know that the guy plays on his off wing, his off defensive side. He's left-handed, he plays on the right. It's useful because there's always a lack of right defenseman, but Edler made a really simple pass from behind the net that went to Schmidt, and because it looked so awkward, him being on his offhand, that he gave it up and it turned into a goal 3 seconds later. So I don't know about you playing on your offhand. Maybe you should switch that up. So that's a lot of negativity. And it just sucks being a Canucks fan right now, because when they were bad a few years ago, it didn't really matter. Fine, you're bad. Megna and Chaput are playing. You're a year or two off of the Sedin era. It's time to reload, get some draft picks, which they didn't fucking do. Try to finish as low as possible, which they did, even though they were signing all these veterans to these ridiculous contracts. And load up, and that's fine. But when you see Pettersson, Demko, and Hughes able to be effective contributors on entry-level contracts, and you see Miller in his prime, Horvat in his prime, Brock Besser probably in his prime as a goal scorer. Although, because he doesn't rely a lot on speed, I could see him being an effective goal scorer probably till he's like 31, 32, maybe a bit beyond. So that's where it's frustrating, when the team can't compete and they're wasting these years. That's what's frustrating. I'd like to see something change. Oh, also losing Ian Clark. Like, fuck me. It's terrible. All right. Let's actually talk about that game that happened last night. So, the Oilers and the Canucks. I thought that the Canucks looked a lot more competitive here than they had before in the Battle of Ontario. Edmonton only needs one more point to clinch for the playoffs before this game, so I figured they're going to be pretty motivated. I saw that Lind started with Horvat and Pearson. Kind of a shame because Höglander works so well with Horvat and Pearson, and I thought that he kind of struggled in this game to know where to go with Miller and Besser. I don't think Brock is a great playmaker. He's okay with it, but he kind of struggles. The guy's a trigger man. So on paper, you'd think, great, Miller and Höglander digging around. They're pretty tough, but they're great on the boards. It'd be great to get Brock open, but it just it didn't work for me. So yeah, because there were a couple times in the beginning where Höglander and Miller would actually go to the same spot, like right behind the net. They'd get the puck, but then they end up not generating a shot. Hamonic had a nice save on a wide open Oiler. The Oilers, it's like they're playing fucking video game hockey out there. They are so good at these cross-ice plays, and they always send guys behind the net and throw it out. They're so good at opening up defense and goaltending and working with those passes. That's how you have to score on modern goalies, because right now the modern goaltending game is so well refined that goalies basically just are gigantic monsters who move. They sort of move like when you're playing... It's almost like you're playing air hockey and you just kind of... Actually, you know what it's like? The tabletop hockey, when you got the big goalie who's... There's no holes in the actual goaltending figure. You just move it to the left and the right, or like in Blades of Steel or something. Pucks rarely go through the goalies, although we saw a bit of that tonight. So you have to get them to open up and move side to side. And that's what the Oilers are great at. Also, having McDavid scare everybody every time he enters the zone. He backs all the defensemen off and just kind of causes chaos. So that's going to help you out. Like, how lucky is Puljujärvi to play shotgun on a line with Draisaitl and McDavid, an MVP and the soon-to-be MVP of the league on the same line, and you just get to sit there and pick up any pucks that they don't put in. Edmonton scored to open it up and make it 1-0. Canucks failed on their breakout. Lind on the wall, leaves it for Horvat. Horvat and Pearson turn it over to the blue line. McDavid just blazes in past 3 Canuck defenders, which really, you can tell, shook them up. Lind safely played it to the glass, and it comes back to Edler behind the net. This is where you had a breakdown. The Canucks had it. They had numbers. There were all 5 Canucks in the zone to the Oilers 3, and Edler had the puck in a very safe spot behind the net, but after that McDavid rush, they just started forcing things. Edler passed to Schmid, who was on his offhand, like he likes to play. He missed that. McDavid checks him. Puck goes to Draisaitl to McDavid. Everyone's looking at those two. Goes back to Puljujarvi, who gets to be the guy nobody pays attention to when you play in a line with two of the best people in the league. I thought that halfway through the first period, the Canucks started looking way more competitive. And their bottom six actually had a few good shifts. I thought McEwen and Vesey had a nice forecheck. Hauerluck and Highmore had several great shifts that did exactly what a fourth line should do. They went out there. They were fast. They caused turnovers. They forced the Oilers to play in their own end, and they started getting that momentum back for their team, so that when the Canucks scoring line comes over, you can ride that momentum and try to generate some more chances. Unfortunately, they're probably your third line, and they need to be a good fourth line on a much better team. But Hauerluck and Highmore looked pretty good. Vesey, he's just too small, and while he can stick handle a bit, he makes a lot of bad passes, and there's nothing else he can really do. I thought McEwen actually looked pretty good in this game. I did feel embarrassed for McEwen. I think Vesey had it on the right wing. McEwen is in the zone. He starts loudly banging his stick when he's sort of in the slot, but then he puts himself out of position immediately. I felt a bit cringe for him. Lind actually had a nice pass that got a Canuck defender shot towards the net. Lind covered for the D-man and then checked the Oiler leaving the zone to prevent an odd man rush. That was nice. Schmidt scores to make it 1-1. Canucks had several good shifts in a row. This is where Hauerluck and Highmore were working really, really well together. The next shift after the Double H line, the top line comes on. Höglander blows a pass in the offensive zone, but they keep it in. And Schmidt scores with a floaty kind of wrist shot. And you think, oh yeah, the Oilers' goaltending is not very good. Like Toronto, you just have to get some decent shots towards, and you can score. McDavid, he really gets away with a lot, man. He interfered with a Canuck at the Canuck blue line. Then he goes over into the Canuck zone. He starts cross-checking. They just kind of let him do whatever he wants, and they weren't going to call a lot of penalties here anyway. McDavid line rushes back 3-on-2, and Hamonic had a really great poke check on Draisaitl. Hamonic has been a great story for the Canucks. To pay somebody that little and have him play in your top line and be an effective shutdown guy is fantastic. Hughes took a penalty after a Nugent-Hopkins line has him chasing all over the place. You could just see. You're just waiting for the penalty to happen. Miller has a really spiteful penalty kill. He's not going to check the Oiler player trying to break out of his zone, but he just sort of slaps his stick against him just to push the puck back. Not to get the puck, but just to kind of say, fuck you, I'm going to kill this penalty. Then he turns around and runs over another Oiler in his way. It just sets a good tone. And actually, on that power play, the Oilers really didn't get anything going. So Miller, when he can not take a penalty or fuck up his back checks, I like his attitude so much. When things are going well, Miller's great. He's like a hallucinogenic drug. You know, if it's a good time, it's going to be a great time. If it's bad, it's going to be terrible. It was, the Canucks ended up getting a power play after that. Höglander looked really good in the power play again. He can move the puck in tight. Hughes should really shoot more, but he seems to prefer being a passer or only shooting if it's a really dangerous setup. They didn't get anything too well there, but I really like seeing Höglander on the power play. So maybe they could use him moving forward. I don't know where you'd put him, but he's the kind of guy that can go towards the net. He could be effective in front of the net, causing havoc. He can win battles on the boards. He can stick handle in tight. He can make passes in tight, and that's what you need. And that's usually how the Canucks play with Miller and Pettersson and Hughes. That's their game plan. When they're on the power play, they are just so good at making these passes happen in basically negative space. It was fairly even play until McDavid strikes again. There's to make it 3-1. Horvat can't handle a Hamonic pass. McDavid just flies in and squeezes a shot under Holtby's arm. Canucks scored again, though, to make it 3-2. Not to be outdone, Miller, shortly after the McDavid goal, powers in, makes a nice individual effort, and scores a really beauty goal. He's a nice NHL player where he can do the kind of junior all-star highlight reel moves, but he's also, a stocky guy who can take hits and play physically and win on the boards. Höglander had a really nice delayed pass in the neutral zone, waiting for things to happen. Höglander is so smart with that. I don't think he's ever going to be a top line guy, and he doesn't need to be, but he's going to be a really effective second line / third line player. He just doesn't finish enough, but he is young. Yeah, what happened on that goal? Höglander had the nice pass. Brock the puck kind of went over to Brock and an Oiler. And I guess they ruled that the Oiler player kicked it out, and that went to Miller, who took over and scored. Highmore had another nice shift or two after that goal. He was playing with more confidence, holding onto the puck longer, making smarter plays. The guy seems smart. I think he's never going to get as many points as Gaudette. Now we're seeing Gaudette score in Chicago, which makes you think, is Travis Green the problem if Gaudette can start scoring again? Or is it just a lack of depth and just a terrible catastrophe of a season? The Oilers scored soon after that to make it 4-2. And that was basically the game. Brock Besser would get a goal later on, and that was about it for the Canucks. So overall, I think the Canucks looked a lot more competitive against Edmonton than they did against Toronto and Ottawa. Toronto, you would expect them to struggle to be competitive against when Toronto needs to learn how to have that killer instinct after Vancouver embarrassed them, especially. It's a tough time to be a Canucks fan. It's very frustrating to think of what this team was just a season ago and how the players they've shipped out through sheer incompetence and lack of time management and problems with the owner and the GM. It's very frustrating. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next just because it can't possibly get any worse. And to see what Aquilini's going to do. I hope he sells the team to somebody who gives a shit. Or maybe maybe the problem is Aquilini really does care but wants to be involved. So if he could sell the team to somebody who doesn't want to be involved and wants to pay for a president and a proper front office for hockey. It wasn't that long ago that the Canucks were the most respected team in the league in terms of players and playing there, and they were ahead of the curve and worrying about recovery. Kessel, I saw a quote from him saying, when we were on the Canucks, they gave you anything you wanted, and it was all about recovery because they knew that the NHL season is a grind. NHL playoffs are a grind. And when you play in the West Coast and you have to travel that much, it's even more of a grind. And they were ahead of that curve. They spent a lot on everything that would give them a competitive advantage. They knew how to work the salary cap to their benefit. And yeah, Gillis couldn't draft very well, but you know who else doesn't draft very well? It's the fucking Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're doing pretty damn well because they're smart. You see what Yzerman is doing, what he did in Tampa Bay, what he's doing in Detroit. You see what all these GMs are doing who are better than the rest, whereas Benning just feels like he is completely over his head. And you also have to blame Aquilini for not giving him any kind of a support and for probably meddling. This team is in a real tailspin, and it hasn't been fun to watch a lot of these games, but we'll see what happens going forward. We get to see Jonah Gadjevich, see if his feet can carry him through the NHL. I'd like to see Jack Rathbone play. I was happy with Olli Juolevi. Green doesn't seem to play him too much, and maybe that's a good coaching move because he knows how not to get him exposed. But man, Juolevi can skate and he can pass and he can hit, and he's very serviceable. So Troy Stitcher also did all that too. But what did you think? What do you think about all this bullshit? It's just pissing me off. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching.